What are some of the things that you think can creep up on us without us realizing that they're actually stealing our ability to live long and enjoyable lives?
All right, that's a huge question to unpack. But as somebody who's a biologist, so I study what actually happens in a body, and I'm a medical doctor, so I understand the consequences of aging, meaning that, like there's a lot of things that happen and we kind of fall apart as we age. The goal of actually living long and living well, this is the longevity kind of goal, is can be boiled down into some basic things. Number one, I'll tell you that a lot of people don't think about this is you got to dodge stupid things that'll take your life too early. Okay. One of the things is accidents, things that we would learn how to do as kids that, you don't put a paper clip in the electric socket in the wall socket. You don't put the hair dryer in the bathtub, that kind of thing. But, actually, there's a lot of people who intend to live long that actually have their journey cut short by driving drunk, speeding, and driving in a reckless sort of way. Don't pack your own parachute kind of thing, right? So there's a laundry list of traumas that can actually happen, right? Then the things that we don't realize that can happen to us that rob us of our ability to live long are really the chronic diseases. And, those of us who are out there talking, on podcasts and social media about cancer, heart disease, diabetes, stroke, autoimmune disease, the usual litany of things. I can tell you as a physician, as a medical doctor, those conditions really set us up to have a shorter life than we would like to have. Why? Well, listen, if you're having cardiovascular disease, so many things can trip you up along the way to longevity that you just might not make it there. Same thing as cancer. Now, I'm a cancer researcher, and I can tell you that there are some remarkable breakthroughs that are actually happening today that, really I've seen things that I never thought I would actually see in my career, which is, people with cancer, like literally being cured of their disease, including my own mother. I think we've talked about this before. I just had lunch with her and she's doing perfectly well 10 years after having stage 4 cancer. So, but for the most part, and I think this is still quite true, cancer as a diagnosis is viewed as really kind of like the end game. And, you're on a clock to the finish line way too early. So one of the things that I would say that sneaks up on us is that we don't realize that we go about our lives doing what we think is best, and boom, either we get into a traumatic accident, or we develop this kind of like we get hijacked by a chronic disease. Those two things, remarkably, if you focus on all the things that people talk about for biohacking and longevity and CERT and all these other, really incredibly sophisticated concepts of longevity. If you don't actually dodge accidents, trauma, or chronic disease, you really kind of short shrift yourself that ability to live long. So I wanted to start there because I think that it would be foolish to just go into the infrared light and the cold plunges if you didn't really start thinking about those fundamentals.
And I am glad you started there as well. And I think like one of the other things that I wanted to talk about is like when people think about longevity, it's obviously they think about like quantity of years they live. I know you like to focus on quality and how people feel. What do you think is the link between like excess body fat that people are carrying around as they get older and and the way they feel about themselves as they're aging?
Yeah, fantastic question. So first of all, body fat is actually a very important tissue in our body. It's actually even considered an organ in our body, and we're born with body fat. Okay. And our body fat is designed, the fat cells that make up our body fat are actually intended to be our gas tanks or fuel tanks, just like the tank in the side of your car that you're going to load up at the filling station or the gas station. So let's not curse fat. Let's recognize that having the right amount of fat is actually absolutely critical for having energy. And if you want to actually live long and live well, you got to have enough energy. So you need to have fuel, number one. And what is the fuel that we eat? Food is our fuel. And we don't call the fuel gallons like we do at the gas station. We call them calories. All right. So that kind of demystifies it. Let's talk about excess fat. Okay. And let's talk about excess fat in the context of how much lean muscle mass you actually have. Because this is, fat isn't a tissue that lives all by itself. So as we get older, and I think especially in countries like America, we start seeing overweight and obesity being one of these dominant themes. Now, those are metabolic conditions that are reversible for the most part. We certainly see this if you're taking a GLP-1 agonist drug like Ozempic or Wegovy, you can actually reverse body fat, like a huge amount of body fat. Whether that's healthy or not healthy, that's still actively being researched. But too much body fat is basically like having too much fuel in your body. So you're filling up your car with too much gasoline, all right, and it's spilling out over, except that it doesn't leak out around your pool or on your feet like in a filling station, but actually your body can accommodate that, and it just grows more gas tanks. And so basically you get more and more fat. Now, why is that a problem, and why is that dangerous for people that want to live long and live well? Is number one is that excess body fat, once you have too much fuel, it becomes inflammatory. Okay. Too much body fat, too much energy stored inside your body leads to inflammation. That inflammation leaks out of the fat and goes throughout your system. And so you're basically just a walking, smoldering fire, where the fire is actually coming from your body fat, especially if it's the visceral fat. Visceral fat's the fat that's inside the tube of your body. So you don't have to be a great big person. You could be a thin person, but over the course of your life, you've actually overconsumed and you actually have a lot of visceral fat growing inside the tube of your skinny body or your big body. That's actually quite damaging. So if you want to kind of look at common denominators, if you want to think about another way to truncate your ability to live long, that is to actually nurture inflammation, carry that with you as long as possible, and then just wait for it to actually engulf your house, the house of your health, in total flames. Okay. And so I'm using that kind of a little bit of an exaggerated analogy because that's actually what happens. If we're walking around with inflammation and we might not even know it, we are setting fire to all the health systems inside our body. And one day the things are just going to erupt in flames and take us down. So how do you actually figure that out if you've got inflammation? Well, listen, there's a couple of ways. One is how do you feel? Most people don't realize this because we're not adequately in touch with our own feelings most of the time. We're always focused on the outside of the world. But if you take a quiet moment, go out to the top of a mountain, meditate, and ask yourself, how do you feel inside your body? Most of us know what it feels like to be calm and collected and feel good about ourselves. But if you feel a little jittery and uncomfortable, and there's a good chance you've got inflammation going on. And if you're stressed, you almost certainly have inflammation going on. So one is just listening to your own body if you feel inflamed. But you can go to the doctor, or you can order a blood test yourself for something called CRP. That's C-reactive protein. This is what biohackers do. In fact, you want to order a very specific kind of of CRP test called an HS, high sensitivity CRP. Now you get down to the nitty gritty. And that's a simple blood test. You can just drive over to a place that does blood draws. Somebody can come to your house, draw it, and you'll have the result. And basically, if you have anything higher than normal range CRP, you got some inflammation going on in your body. And where it comes from then becomes the beginning of a kind of a forensic search for what could be inflamed. But excess body fat clearly is one of those causative things for inflammation.
Yeah. And I know one of the other causes of excess body fat, and this can also lead to inflammation, is the way that you eat. I know we've talked extensively about nutrition on the show in our conversations, but I think it's important to kind of always revisit it because I just think your information is so powerful. What do you think are some of the top, tips you have for foods to eat to help people reduce their inflammation, prevent disease, and lower body fat?
Here's some really good news. If you go into a grocery store and you just hang out in the produce section, which is usually near the door, all the fresh food, okay? Or go to the farmer's market whenever it opens up in your neighborhood. Most of the stuff there, most of the fresh foods especially the colorful foods, are going to have anti-inflammatory natural substances. We call them bioactives. I'm a food as medicine researcher. That's what we call. And when you eat those foods, the red bell pepper, the yellow bell pepper, the green pepper, when you actually eat persimmons or oranges or apples or peaches, you pick the season. If it's fruit or it's a colorful vegetable, you're probably going to get some of these polyphenols that are in the foods that lower inflammation. Okay, number one. Number two, anytime you eat produce of any sort, you are feeding your gut with dietary fiber. Now, some foods have much more dietary fiber than others, but the fiber is important because it feeds our gut microbiome. That's the 39 trillion healthy bacteria that live inside our gut, and they love fiber. So you want to feed them dietary fiber? Broccoli will have fiber and apples will have fiber, of course. Lettuce will have fiber. But, some of the soft foods have a lot of fiber you wouldn't have thought about. For example, avocado, guacamole, a lot of dietary fiber in that avocado. How about mushrooms? You go get a British breakfast and they saute some mushrooms. They're really soft. How could that have fiber? Called soluble fiber. And of course, oatmeal is another good way of getting fiber. When you eat foods like that and you feed your gut microbiome, the healthy bacteria in our body digests the fiber. And as they digest the fiber, they're producing through the bacteria their own metabolites that are called short chain fatty acids, sometimes called SCAFAs. And listen, I know people who listen to your show are pretty sophisticated because they probably listen to you talk about these topics and your guests, but they probably are listening to other podcasts where this kind of stuff is coming up as well, like Huberman and all those other podcasts. So short chain fatty acids you probably heard of them before, but let me just boil it down simply. When you eat polyphenols from colorful foods or dietary fiber from fresh produce, you're feeding your gut bacteria. When they're happily fed, they produce these substances that lower inflammation in your body. So if you want to actually lower inflammation caused by body fat, eating the produce, things from the produce section of the grocery store will feed your gut microbiome, and then your body will then start to lower inflammation all by itself. But there's more good news to this. Many of the foods will have their own polyphenols that also help your body burn down harmful excess body fat. So let's call it lowering inflammation, your gut microbiome. That's basically like 39 trillion bacteria that are carrying around fire extinguishers and just like spraying it around and make sure there are no excess flames anywhere. All right. You're tamping down the inflammation. But guess what? Some of the polyphenols in plant-based foods actually put out the arsonists themselves, which can be this excess body fat. So give you some examples. Apples have chlorogenic acid, and so do pears and peaches. Chlorogenic acid is a bioactive that actually triggers in your body the process to burn down excess body fat. So in fact, when you eat an apple a day, you're actually boosting your own metabolism by burning down harmful body fat. Here's another one. I talked about avocados. We're now into the Mexican genre, right? For guacamole. Well, what about salsa with spicy salsa? You want it like mild, medium, or hot? Well, listen, if you get medium or hot, the chili peppers that are used to make spicy foods. I don't care if you put it on a pizza, you actually cook spicy pasta, or you're having a salsa, okay? The zing that comes from chili peppers comes from something called capsaicin. Capsaicin causes that zing to happen on your tongue. There's basically receptors, little catcher mitts that live on your tongue. So when you have a chili pepper, and of course you can just go buy a raw chili pepper and take a bite of it, and I guarantee you're going to get a zing. That triggers a system on your tongue that text messages your brain, okay? On your tongue is called the TRPV1 system. It text messages your brain. It says, hey, brain, we're eating something spicy here. Let's release some neurotransmitters, all right? So one of the neurotransmitters is norepinephrine. That's what actually goes right down your neck. So next time you eat something really spicy, what I want you to do is to, before you put it in your mouth the first time, just take a little spoonful of hot salsa or whatever, close your eyes and put it in your mouth, and you'll start feeling that zing. And you'll actually feel your brain kind of light up. You'll feel the text messaging. And then if you're really quiet and paying attention, you'll feel this chill go down the side of your neck. And that is the neurotransmitter that your brain is sending down to something called brown fat. And brown fat, which is around the side of your neck, behind your breastbone, little bit behind your back, a little bit in your belly. When your brain's neurotransmitters light up your brown fat, like chili peppers do using capsaicin, what you're doing is you are firing up a system in your body that starts to burn down harmful excess body fats. So we talked about just going to the produce section and getting fresh foods and helping your gut lower down the inflammation. That's walking around with the fire extinguisher, putting out fires. Now we're talking about addressing the arsonists that are causing the fires by just taking them out. And so some of the polyphenols, like chlorogenic acid, will begin to do that. And by the way, so can the lycopene in a tomato, and so can hydroxytyrosol in extra virgin olive oil. And so the really cool thing is that we're beginning to get down to the nitty gritty of why it is that plant-based foods are actually good for our health overall, why they are beneficial for us from not just losing weight, but actually optimizing our metabolism. And as we were starting to talk about this, when you optimize your metabolism, you are on the starting gate of the path towards longevity, because now you're getting some of those harmful chronic diseases out of the way that'll take you out too early, so you can just keep on going down that path.
I know a good amount of people that consume content around longevity. They tend to be a bit older because they're like thinking about like, okay, what can I do now to make sure the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years of my life are healthy, etc. But I know it's also important for people my age and younger to focus on longevity as well. Like, why do you think people in their 20s and 30s should focus on longevity before it's too late?
Yeah, well, most of the things that take us out early start really early. For example, cancer can be developing in your body for a decade, and you won't even know it until at some point it just rages and starts taking off. And so anything that we can do, and it's the same thing, by the way, with cardiovascular disease and metabolic syndrome, these things that lead to diabetes or lead to heart disease, blockages in your arteries, these are not overnight things. It's not like you go for a bender one night and the next morning you wake up with a hangover and a blocked heart. Nope. That's been kind of creeping up on you for 10 years, maybe more. Same deal with cancer. Most cancers are forming, clicking away silently, and they grow for a long time before they take off. So what I think is that longevity is really a journey that begins early. So it's like a treasure hunt. You want to actually get as many of those eggs as you can, the golden eggs, that you're hunting for, those treasures. Every single year you start putting an egg in your basket is another step. You're taking advantage of the early moves you can make to get ahead.
There's a lot of talk right now about the importance of building muscle for longevity. As somebody who researches longevity, what are your thoughts on the importance of building muscle and why?
So important. So look, when we think about elderly people, all right, we think about frailty, right? So old people who are very old can get really thin and they look weak and they look frail. And maybe you were lucky enough to know your grandparents as they got really older, or maybe your parents, all right? Or maybe you've just seen somebody in a nursing home or a hospital. You realize that people who get really old, and I'm talking, by the way, 70 is not old anymore. 80, you're getting to be a little older in today's world. 90, you're getting really old. But you know that there are lots of people that are 100 years old and older now. I don't know. Do you know about this? You know how many people are 100 or older today, right now, around the world?
How many?
700,000 people today are 100 years or older. So this isn't like okay, so there's 8 billion people in the world, so it's not that common. But if you really think about it, you can grab together 700,000 people together and have a rave about people who are 100 years old. So what you're asking about muscle, those people who are in their, really their advanced decades, 80s and 90s, you don't want to be frail. You don't want to be one of those people. And frailty comes when you lose muscle mass. And by the way, when do we start losing muscle mass? Not when we're 60 or 70. We start losing muscle mass when we're 40 years old. Okay. So whatever age you are, if once you hit that number 40, your muscles, you're starting to break down more muscle than you're building it, unless you work at it. Now, how do you work at it? Well, first of all, you got to have the right stuff to build the muscle. So you need amino acids. You need to have enough amino acids. And we can talk about like where do you get your amino acids, but that's really important. You need the building blocks for muscle. Then you got to work it. You got to work those muscles to build them, right? So that's physical activity. We can call it exercise, we can call it working out, but you don't need to train for a marathon. You don't need to be an Iron Man or a woman in order to be able to build good muscle. And like I said, when you kind of cross that line of about 40 years old, that's when you should really be making this one of your top health priorities. So, one is getting the amino acids, the building blocks for muscles. Two is actually then working it. So, you're actually building that muscle. And then we talked a little bit earlier, I was alluding to this idea of muscle to fat to bone ratio. So, you want to make sure that you don't have more fat than muscle. And we often call it lean muscle mass because we're just talking about muscle without the fat. Now you might go, what the heck are you talking about, muscle without the fat? Okay, go to the meat market of the grocery store, right? And if you're a carnivore, all right, or an omnivore, think about that. Look for that marbled ribeye steak that's going to give you this real juicy steak. That is meat, protein, muscle that is literally penetrated by lines of fat everywhere. That's why that steak is going to be so juicy. So there is a phenomenon where we can grow a lot of muscle, but it's laden with fat. So you got to have the building blocks of the muscle. You got to work the muscle to build it, but you also need to cut down on the amount of fat that you eat, which has to do with the number of calories and the quality of calories that you eat as well. So look, we're kind of getting into this whole biohacker territory right now, but I'm just telling you, like, it all makes sense. Want to start early, want to keep that muscle going. And by the way, what's the consequence if you don't have your muscles working on your behalf, growing? Not only are you going to become frail, but there's a clinical term, a diagnosis for it, and it's called sarcopenia. Sarco referring to muscle, and penia meaning getting weaker. So sarcopenia is exactly what you want to steer away from. Now, most of my research and most of my books have really been about what do you lean into in order to be able to actually enjoy your life? As I'm looking at longevity, I'm starting to see first and foremost, what are the things that you want to dodge, want to avoid? You want to avoid accidents. You want to avoid chronic diseases. You want to avoid huge loss of muscle mass. You want to avoid sarcopenia. Those are some of the real critical things that you need to keep in mind. Sarcopenia starts at age 40.
You talked about biohacking. We're talking about longevity here. I would love to know, what are your thoughts on some common myths around longevity that you're seeing put out right now?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question. And it's a really good one because, I think that, first of all, let me just say longevity is a field. It's a very popular field. But longevity, living long, is based on a field called geroscience, which is understanding how we age. Unless we know how we age, how are we going to figure out how to go longer, right? So geroscience is a real field of science that tries to look at how the body ages. That's where all the gold nuggets are actually coming from. And by the way, when you hear about a lot of those processes like sirtuins and mTOR and all those kind of terms that you hear in the longevity circles, those are coming from the field of geroscience, gero meaning older, like geriatric. It's a science to help us understand that. Okay, so what are some of the myths? Well, among the many myths that are out there, we were just talking about biohacking a second ago. One of the myths is that, hey, if you just biohack yourself, you're going to be good. You're going to live a long time. All right. Biohacking is really, I think, misunderstood. Some people look at biohacking just simply as measuring yourself. What's my heart rate variability? What's my pulse? How much body fat do I have? How much good quality sleep do I have? Those are all really useful things to have, but what are you going to do about it? All right. So the whole idea of measuring yourself with technology is only half of the game. Other half is actually doing something about it. So I think a lot of people go, well, I ordered a lot of stuff to biohack myself. I should be fine, right? Wrong. You need to know what you're going to do about what you're measuring so you can actually make progress on it. So that's one, I think, important myth, is that biohacking is enough. Nope. You got to actually have an action plan based on what you're actually doing. Second, another one is and this is a big one, that you can't reverse chronic disease. So a lot of people who might be listening to this say, well, I already got arthritis, or I've had breast cancer, or I've had colon cancer. I'm shot. My chances are done. Okay. Not so. For the most part, at the cutting edge of medical research, we're beginning to find out that, we kind of all were drinking a little bit Kool-Aid in medicine, where we're like, well, you got a chronic disease. We just got to treat you forever. I think the amazing thing is that we're beginning to discover that some of the things that we thought you couldn't treat, we can actually reverse them. We don't have the simple magic pill, like the Matrix, the red pill or the blue pill. We don't have the single pill that actually will reverse everything overnight. Not yet, but I will tell you that we're beginning to find that you can reverse cardiovascular disease. You could take unhealthy blood vessels, circulation, that's what I study, and you can start to make them healthy again with diet and exercise and lifestyle and stress management. This is one of the things that my friend and colleague, Dr. Dean Ornish, has built his whole career on, is how do we actually reverse some of the ravages that we see in aging. Same thing for cancer. I was mentioning earlier, my mother was stage 4 cancer, stage 0. When did that happen? Well, we're beginning to realize that if you allow the body to do its job, and our immune system plays a huge role in this, we can actually reverse cancer. And that's a really important thing. It's not just all about chemo and all about surgery and all about radiation. There are lots of things that we can do and we're really just at the beginning of discovering this. What are the things that we need to do to kind of reverse what seemed like a no-win scenario into a total win scenario? All right. And we're beginning to see this as well. By the way, this is not a plug. This is actually just to share information with you. There is, I run an organization called the Angiogenesis Foundation. It's a nonprofit. You want to check our website. It's www.angio.org. We just recruited this remarkable patient ambassador to our organization who had end-stage brain cancer. That is, you talk about like a no-win scenario. That's one of them, brain and pancreatic cancer. This individual, her name is Rebecca Devine. She's a patient ambassador, was able to actually up her own game with her own immune system, get a cancer vaccine. Okay. I know vaccine is a dirty word, but she actually activated her own immune system. And guess what? Her own immune system ramped up and wiped out her brain cancer. It's totally like jaw-droppingly amazing. Her handle's called That Brainy Blonde. You want to check out somebody who's amazing? Check her out. This is the idea of reversing. That's another myth, that you can't reverse these end stages. I'm just giving up. Nope. Third myth is that, you got to live in a blue zone to live a long time, right? So, that my friend and colleague, Dan Buettner, is one of the people, a journalist who discovered or put the name of the blue zone out there. 5 places around the world where people live long and live well. And Costa Rica and Italy and Sardinia and Greece, Greek islands and Loma Linda, California, and in Okinawa, Japan. These are places where people go, oh my gosh, you're like this old? How many people are this old? And how well are they living? All right. You don't have to you don't have to immigrate into a blue zone to live well. Some people are like, well, I got to live in a blue zone, right? No, you can bring the blue zones into your own house, into your own existence. Those are 3 myths. And how do you do that? Well, they sleep well. They've got good social support. They eat good food. They don't eat too much. These are some pretty simple things that you can do to make your own home, your own personalized blue zone. So those are just 3. I mean, I got a long list of things that are common myths out there, but to me, that's what's exciting as a researcher, looking at longevity. Plenty of stuff to be done in fruit flies and roundworms and lab mice. Totally cool. For me, I'm somebody I'm a very practical guy. I like to know, how does all this science, which might seem like just technical stuff or mumbo jumbo to a lot of people, how do we boil that down in a way that can be translated in really easy to grasp and to adopt ways? That's kind of like what I'm doing in the longevity space.
This episode is brought to you by Live On Labs. If you are someone who is constantly stressed, feeling depleted, and exhausted, I have some exciting news. My friends at Live On Labs have an incredible deal I can offer you. When you buy any product at full price, you get a free carton of their highly popular B complex product, which I take every day. Taking a B complex supplement can also help support things like a healthy metabolism, increased energy, blood sugar balance, and learning. Vitamin B supplements can help replenish nutrients depleted from stress. Live On Labs puts years of research into each product, which is why I stand behind them. Using liposome encapsulation technology, these products promote elite absorption so the supplements get into your cells and give you the best benefits that you're looking for. Right now, you can get a free carton of Lipospheric B Complex Plus, which is a $56 value with any full price purchase from liveonlabs.com. This supplement has the B vitamins and minerals that you need to help turn food into sustained natural energy throughout the day. Just add B Complex Plus and any other full price supplement to your cart and enter code BOPES24 at checkout to get this amazing deal. Now back to the show. Speaking of biohacking, myths, preventing disease, what's your hot take on microplastics and should people be concerned with them?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, listen, plastic is something that is everywhere in our environment. For better or worse, the better part is that plastics made life really convenient, made things light, made things cheap. But unfortunately, we, until recently, didn't have as clear an understanding that the plastics that we put around our food, that we package our food in, that we drink out of, that we eat off the plastic fork, these plastics will actually ultimately shed into our food. Microplastics, these are less than 5 millimeters, and then nanoplastics, which are even smaller. You've heard of nanotechnology? Well, there's nanoplastics is just a smaller bit of plastic. We can't see them for the most part. We eat them, or we breathe them, or somehow they get into our body. There's plastic in shampoo. So if you washed your hair this morning in the shower, you probably used some shampoo or conditioner, all right? And that thing ran down your face. You probably got some in your nose or your mouth, maybe in your ear. It's got plastic in it, little bits of plastic. You wash your hand, all right? And then you're actually rubbing your eyes with your hands. You probably transferred some plastics into your eyes, all right? This is how ubiquitous it is, microplastics. And now, a few years ago, when people were asking me about plastics, I actually said, it stands to reason that it can't be good for us, but we don't have enough evidence yet. Fast forward to today. About a year ago, we started realizing, no, we can find them now, and they're dangerous. They're bad. They cause inflammation. A group of cardiologists and neurologists, actually from Italy, about a year and a half ago, looked at people who had blockages of their carotid arteries. That's the big blood vessels that feed your brain, okay? And they found that when those are narrow, you can actually pick out the block. You can clear the blockage. And they found, remarkably, about 40% of people with those blockages, they were studded, embedded with plastic. Like, what the heck? Like a plastic plaque? Yeah. And when they followed these people over time, they found that the people who had the plastic stuck in their blood vessels had a 4x increased risk of having a fatal heart attack or a stroke downstream. That's an OMG kind of thing, discovery, okay? Now we're finding microplastics live in your brain. They accumulate in your brain. How much? Well, a recent study looked at brain autopsies and found that the amount of plastic that can accumulate in your brain is about the amount that you'd find in a plastic fork or spoon. Now think about that. Like, go into your cupboard and pull out from your picnic equipment, a plastic spoon. Imagine you took a hammer and bashed that all up and then just mixed it into your brain, dispersed it. That's not good. We're also finding microplastics in blood. You can measure. We never thought about measuring it. Now we can. It's in blood. All right. It's circulating around everywhere. We're also finding microplastics in the testicles. Not good. If you're a guy, you don't want to be having plastic in your balls. But urologists who are doing surgery actually have found when they were doing surgery on the penis, they actually took tissue out and looked at it under the microscope. Guess what? Plastic in the penis gets into the penis as well. And they took it one step further to take a look in human semen. All right. And they found bits of plastic floating in semen as well. So can't be good for us, isn't good for us. Got to avoid it. Very difficult to dodge all of it. But what are some of the practical things that you can do? Well, number one, throw out all those plastic storage containers that you use to put leftovers in. Get rid of those. Okay. Buy Pyrex or glass. You can have a plastic top or rubber top for it, but store it in glass. Don't store in plastic. Same thing as baggies. Unfortunately, those plastic bags are so convenient for freezing things. Not good either. Okay. Hidden microplastics. Here's the last place that you would think would be having microplastics. Tea bag. A tea bag that you would use to make some healthy green tea. All right. So what do? You take a cup, you pour some hot water in it, you steep your tea bag in it, right? It's really great. Well, the tea bag is made out of paper, right? Yeah. However, to prevent the paper tea bag from tearing in the box or along the way, the tea companies spray it with a fine layer of plastic. So it's a little bit more, so stronger. Makes a lot of sense to do that, except when you actually brew tea with a plastic sprayed tea bag. This has been studied now. A typical tea bag will release up to 1 billion micro and nanoplastic particles into a cup of tea. Now you drink that and it's all in your body, right? And we know that it'll go to all the parts of it we mentioned earlier. So again, if you want to live long and you want to dodge those chronic health problems and you want to dodge inflammation, and plastic will cause inflammation, we know that. Microplastics do cause inflammation. You want to make some practical moves to kind of get away as much as possible from those plastic particles. And I think because the world is sort of waking up to this problem now, I'm optimistic that manufacturers and people who are and innovators are going to come up with ways to find a different solution to having these microplastics shedding. In the meantime, glass, Pyrex, those are like the really convenient ways to actually do it.
As far as like rank ordering, what's most important for people to prevent disease, feel better, lose fat? Like, I know we've talked about a lot of different things, and we've also talked about people not just trying to quote unquote biohack their way into feeling better. If you were to rank order, like which ones are most important for people to focus on first, which ones would they be?
Hands down, it's getting better gut health. Okay. We've got 39 trillion bacteria. These are your worker bees. Okay. They're in my gut. They're in your gut. They're there to actually help us get healthier, not to mess us up. But when we mess them up, they can't do their job. So there's one thing that you want to actually make an effort on that doesn't take very much effort. It's not too expensive. It doesn't even take too much thought. Eat foods that have a lot of dietary fiber. And these are, by the way, easy things that you can find in your grocery store. They're not expensive. Your oatmeal, your apples, your mushrooms, your avocado. These are kinds of things that have a lot of dietary fiber. Want to do some research on it? Just go type up dietary fiber food ranking, and you'll get a whole list of all the things you can buy with dietary fiber. Now, you can actually buy dietary fiber supplements, or you can order them. I always tell people it's always better to get whole foods, get your stuff from the Whole Foods rather than order them pre-boxed and chemically packaged, because if you look at the ingredient label, a lot of these pre-prepared diet fiber formulations have a lot of other junk in them. Some of the junk could actually inadvertently damage your own gut microbiome. So good gut health lowers inflammation, improves brain health, live long, feel better, have a better mood. Your gut also improves your metabolism. So again, it helps you heal from the inside out. To me, like that's number one, number two, and number three of the top priorities.
Talking about the mind and the brain, and the gut, really, I think one of the things that people get really concerned with is cognitive function as they're getting older, and their ability to still think clearly, make good decisions, problem solve, not have negative self-talk, etc. What's your take on like how what we've been talking about like influences our overall mindset and outlook on life?
We all want good brain health. Let me just tell you, I study blood vessels, angiogenesis, blood vessel, genesis, how your body grows and maintains them. I will tell you that there's 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels packed inside our body. 60,000 miles. That's so much if you pulled out all the blood vessels and lined them up end to end, you'd form a thread that would wrap around the earth twice. That's how huge this surface area. These are the highways and byways that deliver oxygen to your organs and deliver nutrients to your organs, including your brain. You know how many blood vessels are in your brain? Take a guess of how many miles of blood vessels are in your brain.
5,000?
400 miles of blood vessels of the 60,000 are actually inside our brain. They're wrapping around all the neurons and everything else. Okay. So when your blood vessels are healthy, your organs can be healthy, like your brain. When your blood vessels are sick, all right, and they can't get blood flow, the highways and byways, they got potholes, they've got boulders on them, road out, okay? They're not drivable. When your blood vessels are sick, you're not getting oxygen, you're not getting nutrients to your organs. And when that happens in your brain, there's no way, no matter what you do, no matter what you biohack, you're actually going to be able to get an optimal brain health. So what we want to do as we get older is we want good, healthy brain. It starts with our blood vessels. And so if you think about your circulation, and by the way, exercise is one of those ways of actually keeping our blood vessels healthy. And this is why staying physically active and exercising is so important for longevity.
What are your thoughts on supplements as it relates to longevity?
Well, so I'm doing a lot of research right now on this very subject. I'll tell you what I found so far. I think that if you want to be very healthy, like you want to be in excellent health, you can achieve that when it comes to diet and lifestyle with good, healthy foods and, a good exercise or physical activity, sleep, stress management, that kind of stuff. You don't need a supplement for the most part. There are a few exceptions. I'll come back to those in a second. But if you want exceptional health, you might want to have some supplements because your regular life that most people live just can't cut it to get to that optimal level. But let's talk about what are some of the things that diet and lifestyle just can't do for most people because we don't get enough. Number one, omega-3s. We know omega-3 fatty acids. It's a healthy fat found in salmon and fatty fish and actually a lot of seafoods. All right. Actually, it's a plant-based substance because it comes from algae, which are plants of the sea. All right. They're just eaten by fish over time on the food chain. We know that when you have enough omega-3s, your metabolism's healthier, your brain's healthier, your blood vessels are healthier, all those important things, and your inflammation's lower, and your immune system is better. All your health defenses that I've written about in my book, Eat to Beat Disease, actually are starting to become better and better and better. Most people don't eat enough omega-3. Even people who live by the sea, okay, unless you're a fisherman and that's all you're eating, you're probably not getting as much omega-3 as you want, all right? So easy peasy solution is to buy omega-3, high quality omega-3 dietary supplements. That's an easy way. You don't want to be, cooking salmon all the time, or you're tired of eating salmon all the time. Get your omega-3s. Guarantee you that's going to actually pay off. Here's another one that most people don't get enough of. Vitamin D3. Sunshine on your skin helps your body generate vitamin D3. Vitamin D3, good for metabolism, good for bone health, good for fighting cancer, good for blood vessel circulation health, good for metabolism, all those important aspects. I can tell you that most of us don't get enough sunlight on a regular basis because why? We live indoors now. We work indoors. We wear clothing. And if you're in the northern hemisphere, there's a good chance you're not getting enough sunlight just because of the weather, the cloud cover. All right. So vitamin D3 is one of those things which is remarkably deficient in huge swaths of the population. That's an easy little supplement to get and take. All right. So those two supplements, I think, are no-brainers to be able to take in order to improve your health.
There's a lot of talk right now about people being like magnesium deficient. And I know for me, taking magnesium helps me with my stress, sleep, anxiety, etc. What are your thoughts on magnesium as it relates to what we're talking about?
Sure. Well, listen, magnesium is a micronutrient. It's actually found in soil. It's found in foods that we eat because we live on a planet that's got these elements in them like magnesium. Our cells need magnesium to function adequately. And, again, I'm a scientist as well as a doctor. I don't like to go with social media trends or longevity trends. Magnesium's not a cure-all. Not everybody is deficient in magnesium. What I tell people is that, you know what? You want to check it out? Go get a blood test to check your magnesium levels. See if you're deficient or not, because maybe you are fine. If you're fine, you probably more probably isn't more. In fact, you probably don't want hypermagnesiemia, which is too much magnesium in your body. We live in a culture where if a little is good, maybe I should just have a whole heck of a lot of it. This is kind of like that crazy pendulum swing that we see with health trends. What I would say, is get tested to see if you've got low levels. And if you do, then you have something to aim for, to fix or to get to a better level. Get tested again after a while, a couple of weeks, a month, to see if you've actually gotten up to your levels. I think this is the healthier, more balanced, more practical way to think about things rather than just jumping on a fancy trend that you hear people talking about.
I know we've talked about fasting on the show, and I know you've talked about fasting in your work as well. I think, sometimes I think people think that they can just fast and then they'll hack their way into longevity or living longer. Do you think that people in today's world, with it being so popular, sometimes over-index on fasting?
I think we over-index on anything that is popular and mediagenic. Let me just tell you, intermittent fasting works and it is good for you. But to really think about intermittent fasting, it's not a new thing. It's not a new trend. Been around for thousands of years. And in fact, we all intermittently fast very naturally. First, what does intermittent fasting do? Well, intermittent fasting basically means sometimes you're eating, sometimes you're not. That's why it's intermittent. You're intermittently fasting versus intermittently eating. That's all that means. Well, you know what? We do that naturally. When we're sleeping, we're not eating. That means we're fasting. So because we intermittently sleep, we're also intermittently fasting at the same time. Okay. Now, the key to understanding this is what's happening while you're sleeping, what's happening when you're fasting. Well, when you are fasting, your body's insulin levels are going down. Your insulin levels are going down because you don't need to draw any more blood glucose into your system. You're not eating, you're not getting any more energy. No need for insulin. All right. So when your insulin levels go down, your metabolism shifts gears to do something else. Besides store fuel, it begins to burn fuel. So instead of when you're waking and eating, your insulin levels tend to go up. You're trying to store that fuel. You're actually putting fuel into your tank. But when you're fasting, it's basically like your tank is filled. Let's get in the car and drive off. And now your body is shifting gears. So imagine your car, your body's like a Ferrari. Okay. You're filling up in the pit. Everybody's changing the tires and you're getting new gas and an oil change and all that kind of stuff. And when you take off again, by the way, then you're actually burning down the fuel. So when we're intermittently fasting, we're actually burning fuel down. We're burning body fat and our metabolism is getting better. All right. So simply put, that's the benefit of intermittent fasting. And it's a component of many types of biohacks that we can do to get to a healthier level. By the way, because I've been now so up to my gills in my work in longevity, I actually just started a new Instagram account. It's called Longevity by Dr. Lee. You've heard about Body by Jake? Well, I'm actually doing Longevity by Dr. Lee because I really feel that there are practical ways to understand this complex science that people need to hear about. And just like the way that you're asking the questions, like, all right, so what does all that mean? And how do I make sense of what's important to follow or not important to follow or over ascribe to one concept or not? I'm a super practical guy. I like to make what science is teaching us into something that people can put into action every day.
Well, Dr. Lee, this has been another incredible episode. Always enjoy our time together. Thank you so much for coming back on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Doug.
You got it.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I really think you're going to like this video as well. I'll see you there.